I didn't begin this story out of revenge. I didn't even begin it out of anger. The truth is, it began in a kitchen. Not my kitchen. Not the one where I spent years cooking dinners, warming leftovers, kissing my son's forehead when the world outside felt cold. No, this kitchen was tucked behind a wedding tent. There was a folding chair, a tray of untouched appetizers, and a place card that didn't say Mother of the Groom. It simply said Joan Whitmore, as if I was a last-minute guest, or someone who worked there. But let me not rush ahead. Let me take you back to what I gave before they tried to take everything. I was 30 years old when Daniel's father left. Not died, left. He packed a suitcase, said something vague about not being cut out for fatherhood, and walked out the door. Daniel was just 3 years old. I had $8,000 in shared debt and a drawer full of interior design sketches that no one wanted to see unless I also brought coffee. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the cheap laminate, always sticky, no matter how hard I scrubbed. Daniel slept in the other room, and I just tried. That's all I did. Tried. Tried to find work, tried to stay afloat, tried not to cry when the baby monitor blinked red in the dark. I called every real estate developer I could find, offered to design lobbies for free just to get a foot in the door. At night, I sewed curtains and sold them at weekend markets. And somehow, in between bottle feedings, rent notices, and exhaustion, a company was born, Whitmore Living. It wasn't a brand back then. It was survival. Daniel was always by my side. He'd sit under my desk, coloring while I traced floor plans. He called my old leather portfolio Mommy's secret suitcase. When I finally got my first real office, a single room above a bakery, he made me a sign that said Boss Lady. He taped it to my desk with pride. He was 5 years old. Every dollar I earned went toward his future. Private school, tutors, OSAT prep. I never bought designer shoes, but I paid full price for every college application he sent. Daniel was smart, ambitious. By the time he turned 28, I handed him 49% of the company. It was my way of saying, I trust you. Build it. Take it further. I've carried us this far. Now it's your turn. He never really said thank you, but I thought he showed it in other ways. The birthday calls. The way he introduced me as the founder. That was enough for me. I just wanted to feel like I still mattered. And for a long time, I believed I did. They say warning signs are always there. You just have to be willing to see them. With Daniel, the signs weren't loud. They were quiet, subtle. He stopped calling me mom in public. He started dressing like every other venture capitalist, sharp suits, cold eyes, and always in a rush. At events, he introduced me not as his mother, but as the founder of a legacy brand. I told myself he was just growing, maturing. I made excuses, until the day I heard his assistant refer to me as the original figurehead. That moment, something cracked. The wedding day wasn't supposed to feel like this. They called it an intimate garden ceremony. Rows of white chairs, hand-lettered signs, curated cocktails. Everything perfect. Everything polished. Everything except me. When I arrived, a young wedding planner with an earpiece barely looked at me. She didn't say, "Welcome, Mrs. Whitmore." She said, "You're Joan, right?" Then handed me a place card and motioned vaguely toward the tent. I walked in alone. Not one person greeted me by name. I wasn't in the front row. Not even the second. I was in the third row behind Marissa's spin instructor and her godmother, who once mistook me for the decorator. On the table was a folded card that said Joan Whitmore. Not mother of the groom. Not founder. Just Joan. That was the moment I knew. Not guessed. Not feared. Knew they were phasing me out. During the ceremony, the officiant spoke of family of legacy, of the people who raised Daniel. But not once did my name leave his lips. He mentioned Daniel's old coach, Marissa's aunt, even their real estate agent. Not me. I smiled. That practice smile. The kind you learn after years of pretending something doesn't hurt. Later at the cocktail hour, I overheard someone whisper, "Did you see where they sat his mom?" I thought she was the founder or something. I kept walking. Head high, heart quietly cracking. Even the welcome video, once a compilation of our early company launches, had been replaced. Now it was 5 full minutes of Marissa and Daniel doing yoga in Tulum. Not a single photo of our first office. Not a single image of the little boy who used to sleep under my desk. Then came the toast. Daniel stood up, champagne flute in hand. He looked out at the crowd and said, "I want to thank everyone who made this day possible, especially my mother, Joan Whitmore, the founder of Whitmore Living." His voice echoed with that practiced charm. He paused, expecting applause. But the garden went silent. Even the jazz quartet faltered. No one clapped. Not even Marissa. I raised my eyes to meet his across the garden. He looked shaken, because for the first time, I wasn't smiling. I wasn't nodding. I wasn't performing. I just looked at him. And that's when he knew he had lost me. Ian's Miuo. The morning after the wedding, the estate was too quiet. No bird song, no laughter. Just the echo of champagne glasses knocked over in haste, and the hollow silence of celebration turned stale. I sat by the window wrapped in a shawl, my coffee untouched. I hadn't slept much. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew something else was coming. At 7:30, Sandra arrived. Always calm, always precise. She walked in holding a thick manila envelope. No words, just a nod. She placed the envelope in front of me and quietly stepped aside. Inside, the full wedding gift registry report. 38 items, all labeled gifted by Joan Whitmore, mother of the groom. Luxury items, spa weekends, travel credits, even a down payment for a honeymoon retreat. Total nearly $70,000, all authorized by someone pretending to be me. The signatures matched mine almost too well, but they weren't mine. They were forged, replicated with the precision of someone who knew I wouldn't check, because they assumed I wouldn't dare. They were right until now. I didn't feel rage. I felt cold, like my soul had quietly stepped away from my body and was watching from across the room. 10,000 for travel, 7,500 for custom furniture, 18,000 for wellness retreats. Not a single phone call, not even a text, just a belief that I would be too polite, too old, too insignificant to object. They confused my silence for permission. They mistook grace for weakness. I called Mr. Ellison. No greeting, no emotion, just 6 words. Place a hold on all transfers. He didn't ask why. He never does. That's why I trust him. That afternoon, Marissa's assistant emailed me. "Hi, Joan. Just checking on a few delayed registry items. Let us know if you need the account info. Resent no mention of the hold." No apology, just a chirpy reminder. As if I had forgotten my own generosity, Sandra replied for me. 4 words. "Pending review. Please stand by." That was enough. That night I walked the halls alone. The flower arrangements were already gone. The white linens had been folded and packed. Oh, only one thing remained. The silence. I passed the bridal suite. The door was ajar. I didn't mean to listen, but the voices inside were sharp cutting. "You said she'd roll over, Marissa," hissed. She always does, the gracious matriarch act. Then Daniel, well, she didn't. A pause. Then Marissa again, quieter, colder. "How long do we have to pretend to tolerate her?" My blood ran cold. Then Daniel said something I will never forget. She's almost 75. One missed medication, one confused statement. That's all it takes to convince a judge. Marissa chuckled, a bitter sound. She's not handing it over, Daniel. You'll have to take it. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't text Sandra. I walked back to my suite with steady steps and closed the door behind me. There was no noise, no rage, just clarity. The kind of clarity that makes your hands still and your breathing slow. I stood in the quiet for a long while, my reflection faint in the mirror above the fireplace. Then I moved, not in panic deliberately. I walked to the writing desk, pulled out the lower drawer, and found what I needed, a small matte black voice recorder. I had used it for years, dictating design notes, contracts, quotes. But now I pressed record for something different. The following recording documents a private conversation overheard on June 19th at 8:42 p.m., just outside the bridal suite of Whitmore Estate. My voice sounded calm. I repeated Daniel and Marissa's conversation word for word. Their plans. Their tone. The venom behind the silk. Then I signed it. Sandra witnessed it. By morning, Mr. Ellison had the file in hand, cataloged, sealed, and archived. Not for drama, not for revenge, but for protection. That day I didn't leave the suite. Not because I was afraid, because I was planning. I sat in the old armchair Daniel once gave me after his first big bonus. Back then, I thought it meant pride. Gratitude. Now I saw it for what it was. Compensation. A payoff to keep me loyal, silent, small. I ran my fingers along the leather armrest and whispered to myself, I'm not safe here. Not from strangers. From my own family. It's hard to admit that the people you gave everything to are now the ones you must protect yourself from. But it wasn't self-pity. It was clarity. And clarity is cold but powerful. Because once you see it, you stop begging. You stop waiting for love that demands your erasure. You start drawing your own lines and defending them. I spent the rest of the day reviewing estate documents, the trust, the shares, the voting rights. Daniel had more power than I remembered giving, some of it hidden under legal phrasing clauses I signed in moments of exhaustion and trust. I made notes. I highlighted vulnerabilities. Then I made a second call to Mr. Ellison. We're amending the trust, I said, effective immediately. His voice didn't waver. Understood. By the end of the day, Daniel had been quietly removed from all discretionary authority, all approvals, all votes, all access. There were no headlines, no boardroom battles. Just a subtle shift of power away from betrayal, back into my own hands. There's something strangely empowering about moving from defense to offense. You don't roar. You don't slam doors. You don't announce anything. You simply shift and watch how quickly the room tilts with you. That week, I didn't schedule meetings. I didn't ask permission. I acted. Sandra and I met in the estate library, just the two of us. No assistants, no board members, just quiet, heavy furniture and the smell of leather-bound ledgers. On the table, the company's full financial structure. Every title, every account, every clause where Daniel had influence, discretionary or inherited. We reviewed line by line. We circled what stayed. We crossed out what went. And then we drew a thick red line through Daniel's name in every place it didn't belong anymore. I didn't inform Daniel. Not yet. I wasn't taking from him. I was reclaiming what he had borrowed under the illusion that blood ties meant blind trust. Sandra looked up at one point and said he'll notice eventually. I nodded. Let him. By then there won't be a ladder left to climb. Because the truth is, Daniel didn't want to inherit. He wanted control. He didn't want to carry the legacy. He wanted to rewrite it in his name while I was still alive. And now I was taking it back. The final blow wasn't legal. It wasn't even personal. It was visionary. The company had funds set aside, $30 million allocated for expansion initiatives Daniel had already teased to press. Fancy headlines, big promises. None of them aligned with what I once dreamed this company could be. So I redirected it, every dollar, into a new branch, the Whitmore Women's Initiative, a grant program for women over 50. Design scholarships, housing support, legal aid for single mothers and survivors starting over. Everything I once wished I had at 30, sitting at a sticky kitchen table with a toddler asleep in the next room. I didn't hold a press conference. I didn't call Daniel. I simply signed the final paperwork and left it at that. A few days later, small headlines began to appear. Whitmore founder launches new women's initiative. 30 millions diverted from corporate expansion to female grants. No mention of Daniel. No legacy division. Just me. Let them read between the lines. Daniel noticed faster than I expected. Not because he was observant, but because people began treating him differently. He walked into the Tuesday board check-in and found his name missing from the pre-read packet. The next day, 2 vendors emailed me directly asking for final sign-off, bypassing him entirely. That's how it begins. Not with fire, with silence. He called me at 7:14 a.m. sharp. His voice wasn't angry. It was confused. A little brittle. Mom, there's some confusion on the funder's end. They thought I'd be leading the legacy division. There's this rumor that you're restructuring. I didn't answer right away. I just let the silence speak for me, because silence when chosen is far louder than shouting. Then I said gently, "There is no legacy division, Daniel." A pause. Then his voice tighter. Why, and this time I didn't sugarcoat it. Because legacy isn't what you take, Daniel. It's what you protect. And you stop protecting it the moment you stop seeing me as part of it. That was the end of the conversation. He didn't scream. He didn't apologize. He simply hung up. And I let him. Because I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was trying to stop hurting myself. The next 2 weeks moved like chess. Quiet moves. Calculated shifts. Sandra and I continued the cleanup. We audited every fund Daniel had approved in the last 18 months. We froze misaligned contracts. We renegotiated supplier terms. We reviewed client language that leaned too hard into next-gen innovation and not enough into human legacy. No headlines, no fights, just restructuring. Marissa, on the other hand, didn't take it as calmly. She didn't call me. She sent emissaries. First, her publicist reached out, then her socialite friend, then an old family friend from some gala. Joan Marissa's hoping to reconnect. You know how weddings are emotional, chaotic. I said nothing, because if you need to use a publicist to ask someone's mother to reconnect, you've already answered your own question. Sandra replied with the phrase, "I've come to treasure. The founder is currently unavailable." At night, I walked through the estate one last time, room by room, memory by memory. I didn't touch anything. I didn't take anything. I simply looked, and then I let go. By the weekend, Sandra had packed the heirlooms, the sapphire ring, the ivory comb, the letters I'd written to myself as a young mother, tucked into a tin box marked someday. Everything archived. Everything sealed, just until someone earned the right to wear them again. I left on a Tuesday. No fanfare, no farewell brunch, no long goodbye, just a single suitcase, a few archived boxes, and Sandra standing beside me in the foyer, holding a clipboard and a knowing silence. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We simply acknowledged that this chapter was done. I stepped into the waiting car. As it pulled away from the Whitmore estate, I didn't look back. Not once. Because there's a difference between losing something and choosing to release it. And I had chosen. The lake house was small, peeling shutters, creaky floors. No staff, no noise, no curated elegance. But it was mine, not inherited, not gifted, not entangled with legacy or expectation. Mine. The first night there, I slept without earplugs for the first time in years. No footsteps in the hall, no emails pinging at midnight. Just frogs and wind, and the sound of my breath slowing down. It was the sound of safety. In the mornings, I made tea by the bay window. No phone in hand, no spreadsheet on my lap. Just the lake breathing in front of me. Some mornings, I watched it for hours. I set up a drafting table in the sunroom, pulled out old sketch pads I hadn't opened since Daniel was in middle school, and I began to draw again. Not for profit, not for branding, but because my hands missed building beauty. One weekend Sandra visited. She brought lemon bars and a stack of final documents. The transition was complete. Daniel's name had been removed from all controlling interests. There were no appeals, no counters, just silence. She handed me one last envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. You didn't have to go this far. No signature. But I knew it was Marissa. I slid it into the fireplace and watched it curl into ash. Let them finally understand. I didn't go far. I went home. 2 days after I burned Marissa's note, a letter arrived. No return address, no signature. Just a photo slipped inside a plain envelope. It was from Daniel's college graduation. He and I side by side, sun on our faces, diploma in hand. His arm was around my shoulder. My hair windswept, my smile real. Taped to the back was a message in my handwriting. The last time you looked at me with respect. Sandra had found it in a box labeled Press Archives. 2008? She didn't say a word. Just handed it to me and let the silence speak. I sealed the envelope and mailed it to Daniel's office. No message, no context, just memory. 2 days later he came. No entourage, no Marissa, just Daniel in a wrinkled blazer, worn eyes and a posture no longer proud. He didn't knock, just stood on the edge of the porch, looking at the lake like it held the answers. I didn't invite him in. I walked outside. We sat on the steps. The silence was different now. Not angry, just real. I got your note, he said. I nodded. I deserved it. Another nod. I let her talk down to you. I let myself believe you'd always just stay. I didn't speak. I'm sorry, Mom. For the first time in years, I looked at him and didn't see my son. I saw a man who finally realized the door behind him was closed. I miss you, he whispered. I smiled. Not in affection, in clarity. Missing someone doesn't mean you get them back. He blinked, nodded slowly. I didn't come for money, or the company, or anything. I just wanted to say it, that I'm sorry. I believed him, but I also knew something else. He was here because everything else had changed. Not because he had. You thought I was a door, I said. He looked at me, puzzled. I added softly, but sorry isn't a key. It's a mirror. He lowered his eyes. There were no promises, no pleads, just a quiet goodbye. I let him walk away. That evening I walked to the water's edge, let my feet sink into the warm sand, let the wind wrap around me. I looked up at the sky, no longer performing, just existing, and I whispered, thank you, not to Daniel, not even to myself, to the silence, to the clarity, to the stillness that let me reclaim, not destroy. The morning sun crept over the lake, brushing gold across the quiet cottage. Joan stood by the window with a cup of black tea, her reflection soft in the glass. She had made her decision. No press releases, no board meetings. No more conversations where she had to smile and pretend her name still held power in rooms where her presence was merely tolerated. She picked up the envelope Sandra had delivered. inside the final documents for her formal resignation from the Whitmore Living Board. It was time. No interviews, no press, just a simple statement. Joan L. Whitmore will be stepping away from all operations to focus on women's empowerment and private creative work. Her hand didn't tremble. It was steady, like the way she once held Daniel's hand crossing the street when he was 5, assuring him everything would be fine. She signed, slowly, clearly. Across town, Sandra sipped her morning coffee and checked her messages. The notice had gone out, quietly, strategically, no fanfare, just presence shifting away like a tide. By midday, Daniel would see the name disappear from directories. No more approval routes, no more shadow to operate under. But Joan didn't feel empty. She felt free. She walked through the hallway of her small lakeside home. Every corner held something. She chose a seashell from a beach trip decades ago, a worn drafting table now holding sketches for community spaces. For the first time in years, her surroundings reflected her, not an image of success for others to consume. That evening, she lit a candle and opened the mahogany box where she'd kept her personal letters and blueprints. She unfolded a letter from Daniel, written when he was 8, filled with crooked handwriting and a drawing of them holding hands. Her fingers lingered on the page, her eyes soft not with tears but recognition. She hadn't lost everything. She had lost illusions. Freedom, she realized, wasn't about escape. It was about finally inhabiting the truth. And the truth was, she no longer needed to perform. Not for Daniel, not for legacy, not even for the world that once worshipped her image, but forgot her heart. That night she sat at her desk and began writing, not for business, for herself. Thoughts that had been silenced under polite smiles and company reports now flowed freely. Her pen danced across the page, reclaiming space. She wasn't starting over. She was starting forward. Weeks passed, and Joan no longer counted them by days, but by mornings that began with silence, not demands. Her life had become smaller in space, but grander in purpose. Every drawer she opened, every step she took, felt intentional. No longer bound to boardrooms, she was finally present in her own life. She woke early one morning to the sound of a soft breeze rustling the trees outside. Birds chirped with no need to perform. The world, like her, was finally just being. She walked to the small study and sat down. On the desk were 2 envelopes, one addressed to Daniel, one addressed to herself. The letter to Daniel was short. I love you. I always will, but I will not shrink so you can grow. She signed it simply, not with the name of a founder, not as a mother, but as a woman who had chosen herself. The other envelope held a letter she had written to herself 20 years ago, a time capsule of hope and exhaustion. She read the words, slowly smiled at the old fears, and folded it back gently. Joan stepped outside, her notebook in hand. Today she would sketch the second building for the retreat, a wellness hall for storytelling workshops and truth-sharing. A place where women could arrive with silence and leave with voice. At noon, she hosted the first small circle of women, 6 guests, aged 52 to 76. No one spoke at first. Then one woman placed her hand over her heart and said, I thought I was the only one. Joan nodded. You never were. Tears came, but they weren't of sadness. They were of release, of being seen, of no longer needing to justify why they were tired, why they were angry, why they still wanted more. Joan spoke last. She said only this: our stories don't need to be rewritten, just reclaimed. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you. Not just for listening, but for feeling. For standing beside every woman who's ever been silent, sidelined, or made to feel like she had no place at her own table. Joan's story is not just about betrayal. It's about awakening. It's about reclaiming the life you built, the love you gave, and the respect you always deserved. If you've ever waited for someone else to recognize your worth, let this be the moment you recognize it yourself. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is not shouting, it's choosing peace, not proving yourself, but protecting yourself. So today, light a candle for the version of you who kept giving. Then take her hand and lead her home. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. You are not alone. Ah.